After 25 years, my company decided to terminate me and replace me with an intern. It's just business, my CEO said casually. I nodded, so is this lawsuit. He laughed, until he saw the legal team arrive with. I've never been the kind of guy who expected much from life other than what I worked for with my own two hands. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I wasn't gifted with any special advantages. But I was raised to believe that if you put in the hours, if you proved your worth, if you stayed loyal, then life, and the people in it, would return the favor. That was a mistake. For 25 years, I worked at Anderson & Company, a logistics firm in Chicago. I wasn't some hotshot executive, but I wasn't just another cog in the wheel either. I built things there. I trained new hires. I solved problems before they even became problems. I knew the business inside and out, from the way trucks should be loaded to how to cut costs without cutting corners. And then, one Tuesday morning, I found out just how much all of that really mattered. It started like any other day. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., same as always. I got out of bed, stretched my aching back, and went through my usual routine: shower, coffee, toast with peanut butter, then out the door by 6:15 to beat the worst of Chicago traffic. By 7 a.m., I was at my desk, sorting through emails and planning my schedule for the day. It wasn't until 9:30 that I got the email from Philip Whitaker, the company's CEO. It was a short message. Ray, can you stop by my office at 10? Need to discuss something. Something about it made my stomach clench. Maybe it was the fact that Philip never called me into his office unless it was something serious. Maybe it was just a gut feeling. Either way, I had a bad taste in my mouth before I even stood up from my chair. When I walked into Philip's office, I wasn't surprised to see Chloe Barnes sitting next to him. HR. That was never a good sign. Philip was dressed like he always was. Expensive suit, hair perfectly styled, like he was getting ready to film a damn commercial for some high-end men's cologne. Chloe, on the other hand, had that pinched, uncomfortable look on her face that HR people get when they're about to tell you something you don't want to hear. Ray? Philip said, smiling like we were old friends. Have a seat. I sat. Philip folded his hands on the desk and sighed, like he was about to tell me something that was just as painful for him as it would be for me. I already knew it was bullshit. You've been with us a long time, he started. You've done great work. We all appreciate what you've contributed to this company. I felt my jaw tighten. Just say it, Philip. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly, like I was making this harder than it needed to be. Ray, we're making some changes. The company is moving in a new direction, and we've decided to. I didn't even let him finish. You're firing me. Chloe, ever the professional, quickly interjected. We're eliminating your position as part of a restructuring process. Eliminating my position, I repeated slowly. I turned to Philip. And who's taking over my responsibilities? Philip hesitated, just for a second. But that was enough. Chloe cleared her throat. We've brought in someone new, Josh Peterman. He's a bright, talented young man who's been interning with us for the past 6 months. He'll be stepping into. I laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't funny, but HLL, what else could I do? You're replacing me, I said, shaking my head. With an intern? Philip had the nerve to look almost amused, like he thought I was being dramatic. Josh is sharp. He's got a lot of potential. And, look, Ray, it's nothing personal. It's just business. Just business, I repeated. My voice was calm. Too calm. Chloe slid a folder across the table. This outlines your severance package. You'll receive 2 months severance pay, along with continued health benefits for another 30 days. We also ask that you sign a non-compete agreement, and in return, we'll provide you with a strong letter of recommendation. I stared at the folder. Then I looked back at Philip. 2 months, I said. Philip nodded. Standard severance for. I picked up the folder and ripped it in half. Chloe gasped. Philip just stared at me, blinking. Ray, he said, in that patronizing tone I'd always hated. There's no need for that. I stood up, smoothing out my jacket. You know, Philip, I said, looking him right in the eye. I thought we were friends once. I really did. Philip had the nerve to smile at that. We are, Ray. But at the end of the day, this is a business decision. I nodded, still smiling. Yeah, and so is this lawsuit. Philip actually laughed. Laughed. Ray, come on. You don't have a case. I tilted my head. You sure about that? He smirked. 100%. I gave him one last look, then walked out of that office and never looked back. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By the time I got home that night, my mind was already racing. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the severance papers I had torn in half earlier, and I started thinking. They thought they could just erase me? Replace me with some 20-something kid just because he was cheaper? No, I wasn't going to let that happen. So I picked up my phone and made a call. Angela Monroe, a familiar voice answered. Angela, I said, exhaling. I need your help. Angela was an old friend from college, but more importantly, she was one of the best damn employment lawyers in Chicago. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. What happened? She asked. I told her everything. Every little detail. When I was done, there was silence on the other end. Then, finally, Well, Ray, she said, a slow smile in her voice. Sounds to me like you've got a case. And just like that, the fight was on. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with Philip and Chloe over and over in my head, getting angrier each time. 25 years of loyalty, dedication, and problem solving, all discarded like garbage. By the time the sun came up, I had made my decision. If they wanted to treat this like just another business move, then fine. I'd make it a business move too. At exactly 8 a.m., I was in Angela Monroe's downtown office, a steaming cup of black coffee in my hand, and a stack of printed emails, contracts, and company memos in my bag. She waved me in the second I arrived, gesturing toward the chair across from her desk. Angela hadn't changed much since college. Sharp brown eyes, no-nonsense expression, and a mind that worked 10 steps ahead of everyone else. She barely even sipped her coffee as she flipped through the documents I brought. I sat quietly, watching as her gaze darkened. Jesus Christ, Ray, she muttered, setting the papers down. I raised an eyebrow. Good or bad, Jesus Christ? She exhaled through her nose. Good for you. Bad for them. I leaned forward. So, tell me, what do I have? Angela laced her fingers together and rested her chin on them. For starters, age discrimination. That intern they replaced you with, Josh? He's what, 24? 23, I corrected. Fresh out of college. Doesn't know Jack SHD. She smirked. Even better. They fired a seasoned senior manager with a proven track record and replaced him with someone barely old enough to rent a car. That alone is enough to raise eyebrows. But this, she tapped the papers. This is where they really screwed themselves. She pulled out one of the internal memos I had managed to print before I left. An email chain between Philip, the other executives, and some members of HR. Trim the fat. These older guys are stuck in their ways. We need fresh blood. The industry is changing. Some people can't keep up. I had seen these emails before. HLL, I had been CC'd on some of them. But at the time, I hadn't thought much of it. But now, reading them through Angela's eyes, I saw what she saw. A pattern. A deliberate effort to push out older employees in favor of younger, cheaper ones. Angela let out a sharp, satisfied breath. Ray, this is textbook age discrimination. But wait, there's more. She pulled out another document I had saved, one of my last performance reviews, where Philip had praised my work. Ray is an essential part of our logistics operations. His experience and knowledge have helped the company adapt through numerous challenges. Angela looked up at me. They can't argue poor performance. You were doing your job well, and they knew it. I couldn't stop the small grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. So what does this mean? Angela leaned back in her chair. It means, my friend, that we have them by the balls. I spent the next 2 weeks working with Angela's team, gathering every piece of evidence we could find. I contacted former employees who had also been quietly let go in recent years. Turns out, I wasn't the only old dog they had tossed aside. One of them was Steve Matthews, a guy who had been with the company for 32 years before he was laid off. When I called him, he laughed bitterly. Let me guess, he said. Philip gave you the "it's just business" speech? I clenched my jaw. Word for word. Son of a BTCH, Steve muttered. He told me the same thing when they pushed me out. Said my methods were outdated. Funny thing, though, after I left, they hired a 26-year-old in my place. Bingo. Angela was thrilled when I told her about Steve and the others. The more people we found, the stronger our case got. But the real nail in the coffin came when we dug into Josh Peterman, the intern they had replaced me with. Turns out, Josh wasn't just some promising young talent Philip had discovered. Oh no, he was the nephew of one of Philip's golf buddies. Angela's team pulled internal hiring documents, and guess what? Josh hadn't even been through a proper interview process. He was handpicked, fast-tracked, and given a role he wasn't remotely qualified for. Angela couldn't stop laughing when she read through it. Ray, this isn't just a case anymore. This is a goddamn slam dunk. The day we hit Anderson and company with the lawsuit, I could almost hear Philip's smug little chuckle die in his throat. Angela filed for wrongful termination and age discrimination, citing the clear pattern of older employees being replaced by younger, cheaper hires. But we didn't stop there. We also filed for retaliatory termination, arguing that I was let go because I had started questioning the company's shady cost-cutting practices. See, what Philip didn't know was that I had been quietly documenting the ways they were cutting corners. For example, did you know that a certain trucking route they had switched to was technically violating federal safety regulations? Because I did. And I had emails proving that I had warned them about it. Angela's team leaked the lawsuit to the Chicago Tribune, and within 24 hours, Philip's phone was probably ringing off the damn hook. A week later, Philip requested a settlement meeting. When I arrived at the office that morning, I was dressed in my best suit, the one I never had a chance to wear at Anderson and Company because, according to Philip, our company had a casual culture. Philip was already in the conference room, looking pale, his usual cocky grin replaced with a tight-lipped frown. Next to him sat Chloe Barnes, looking like she wanted to be anywhere but there. Across the table from them? Angela. She was smiling. Not just a regular smile, a wolf smile. Philip cleared his throat. Ray. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Philip. He exhaled sharply. Look, let's not drag this out. We're willing to offer you 6 months of severance and a neutral letter of reference. I snorted. You think I came all this way for 6 months' pay? Philip's jaw twitched. It's a fair offer. Angela leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. Oh, Philip, she said sweetly. You and I both know that's not going to cut it. Then she pulled out the hiring documents for Josh Peterman and slid them across the table. Philip's face went white. Angela smiled wider. Shall we start the negotiations? I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. This was going to be fun. Philip's jaw twitched as he stared at the documents in front of him. His hands clenched into fists on the table, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked nervous. Angela sat across from him, calm and collected, flipping through the files with a smirk on her face. So, she said, tapping her fingers against the table. Would you like to continue wasting our time, or are you ready to talk about a real settlement? Chloe Barnes, the HR director, shifted in her chair uncomfortably. She had been mostly silent since we arrived, but now she cleared her throat and spoke up. We, need to be practical about this. I think we all agree that dragging this out in court wouldn't be ideal for either party. Angela tilted her head. No, I think it wouldn't be ideal for your party. My client. He's got all the time in the world. Philip exhaled sharply. His usual smug confidence had completely disappeared. He picked up the documents and flipped through them, probably hoping he'd find something that would save his ass. But he wouldn't. The evidence was airtight. Emails proving age discrimination. Proof that my so-called replacement wasn't even qualified. Internal memos that outright mocked older employees as dinosaurs. And the cherry on top? The fact that they had tried to frame my termination as restructuring when they immediately hired a younger, cheaper replacement. All right, Philip muttered, rubbing his temples. What do you want? Angela smiled. Glad you asked. She slid a new document across the table. This is what we're proposing. Philip picked it up and scanned it. His face turned an ugly shade of red. $1 million. He practically choked. Angela leaned back, completely unfazed. Considering the strength of our case and the fact that this lawsuit has already caught the media's attention, I'd say that's a bargain. Philip's nostrils flared. This is outrageous. I shrugged. So is firing a guy after 25 years of loyal service and replacing him with an intern. But hey, it's just business, right? Philip shot me a glare, but he had no leverage here. We all knew it. Chloe adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. Philip, this could get really messy. If this goes to court and the judge sees these emails, we're talking about more than just a payout. We could be looking at a federal age discrimination investigation. Philip slammed the document down on the table. He knew she was right. There was no way the company could afford the damage this lawsuit could do. The board wouldn't stand for it. If it came down to saving the company or saving Philip, I had a pretty good guess at which one they'd choose. Angela gave him a patient smile. So what's it going to be, Philip? Settle now, or watch this thing explode in court. He gritted his teeth. His hands curled into fists. I could practically see the war waging inside his head. Then, finally, fine, he snapped. We settle. Chloe let out a relieved breath. Angela smiled triumphantly. I simply leaned back in my chair, taking it all in. Philip had lost. It took 3 weeks for the final paperwork to be drawn up, but in the end, I walked away with a 7-figure settlement and a non-disparagement agreement. Not that I needed to badmouth Philip or Anderson and Company. The publicity from the lawsuit did that for me. As soon as news of the age discrimination case hit the media, Anderson and Company scrambled to save face. Philip Whitaker quietly resigned 3 months later. The board forced him out, just like he had forced me out. As for Josh Peterman, well, turns out, replacing a seasoned operations manager with a kid fresh out of college isn't exactly a brilliant business move. Logistics fell apart under his leadership. Clients started complaining, shipments got delayed, and after 9 months, he was let go. I heard through the grapevine that he struggled to find another job in the industry after that. Guess Philip's golf buddy couldn't save him forever. And me? I took my settlement money and did something that made Philip's defeat even sweeter. I started my own logistics consulting firm, Carter Logistics Solutions. I hired some of the best people I'd ever worked with, including some of the older employees Philip had pushed out. Within a year, we were directly competing with Anderson and Company for contracts. And within 2 years, we won some of their biggest clients. Their loss was my gain. I ran into Chloe Barnes at a networking event not long after that. She was working for another company by then. She smiled when she saw me, shaking her head in disbelief. I gotta say, Ray, she admitted, you really got the last laugh. I grinned, taking a sip of my drink. Nah, I said, I got something even better. And I meant it. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to see Philip suffer. I just needed to win. And I did. Because in the end, it's just business.
يعني هو يعني احنا كل سنة بيبقى فيه تطور، بس هو الشكل العام انه بيبقى فيه تنظيم كويس في كل سنة. وهو الجديد المرة دي ان الحياة هي اللي بتغطي المهرجان. وتحية لكل العاملين في الحياة مني ومن فرقتي الموسيقية.
وعايزه
يعني
انوه لحضرتك كمان انه النهارده الحفله ترند. حفلة حضرتك يمكن كان في ترند الأول الأستاذ علي الحجار وحضرتك النهاردة. فيعني أعتقد إن ده نجاح كبير جدا، كمان المشاهدين اللي بيشوفونا على التلفزيون.
ما كانش ليا حظ إن أنا أحضر حفلة الأستاذ علي.
أيوة
لكن هتابع بقى بعد كده كل الحاجات.
تابع وتشوف بقى الترند بقى والحاجات. إن شاء الله. سريعا كده أي جديد عند حضرتك بتقدمه الفترة اللي جاية؟
يعني أنا